other thing that I'd like to mention, when you get these necks, like I said, I drilled these holes here and here just for welding. I also had to modify this, make a little bit more gap for me to weld in here. That helped us get the neck on a little bit tighter. So we go around and we'll eventually weld solid all the way around underneath on the back and drill through all the holes, or weld all the drilled holes, and double check our rake and our vertical measurement, and we're good to go. Then it's off to the painter and or powder coaters. This particular frame we're going to mold, so it's going to be painted. And here's a good example of, as I'm welding it, you can see how it pulled the front end to the right. So we'll just have to keep jumping back and forth on our welding to keep this in the center of our alignment line. Now obviously, if you don't know how to weld, you need to get a professional welder to do this part of the job for you. But you know, it's not something that you want to take lightly. You want to make sure that when you're all said and done welding, that it's straight, that it's strong, so you don't have any adverse effects in your rider or expensive Harley down the highway. Now on the models that are Road Glide with the frame mounted fairing, we're going to have to alter this bracket slightly so it can clear. So about 1.5 inches back from the front of this, we'll make a cut right there, and we will remove this piece of the lower portion of the fairing. That's so when the triple tree is in place, it will clear that, and that will be a little obvious when you go to put it all back together. So we will cut that off, take this section off before we install this, so the triple tree will have some clearance in this area here. And obviously in the Batwing FLT fairing models, you don't have to concern yourself with this bracket. Okay, here we are a day later. All of our welding and grinding's been accomplished. We double check our measurements, make sure that the rake angle is where we want it. I mentioned earlier in the video that the factory has a couple degrees off. What I meant to say was a couple tenths. They're right at 26 degrees, and when we started this was 25.80, and here we are at 32.85 on the steering neck. And then of course our instrument that we use for checking the alignment. So it's got the proper rake angle in the steering stem, and if you come around to here, you'll see when I got done with all my welding that the front end didn't deflect to the left or to the right any. It's still straight up and down, vertical to horizon. So I still got my air gap on each side of my alignment rod. In addition to the steering stem that we installed, we do some additional work if you request. We can fill in this whole panel for a smooth frame. This will be all puttied up before we paint it. Put some wiring in the backbone. We cut a hole here on this model so we can feed the internal wiring. It comes up here and the steering stem on the other side. Next thing we have to do on a Road Glide is put the bracket on it and make sure everything's going to clear. So in addition to cutting off this piece here for the steering stem, I welded that back in that we cut off for some support. And we also had to drill out the 5 spot welds and relocate these 2 pieces in order to push the fairing forward slightly. And I'll show you that here in a second. Okay, now like I said, with the models that have a Road Glide stationary fairing, we have to do some modifications to this bracket. We extended this one out, but before we did that, we mounted it up to the stock neck and we took measurements from various set points that weren't going to be moved. You know, we measured from the tank mount, because that wasn't going to be, that location didn't change, and off of the table, and of course the whatever angle that was when we started with, which was 20 degrees. So we took measurements in several locations, We extended these out so when you're going from stop to stop, this part, this inner plastic cover, doesn't tag the inside of the fairing. Now, the rake angle's the same, and we had a 5/8 inch rise in this whole bracket, and it actually went out 1.25 inches. Now, that's important because we need to do that to the lower mounting bracket also. So that's the inner fairing, and when we put it all back together, we're not making contact inside, messing up our paint or anything like that. And there's also another bracket we have to fabricate to mount here to the frame, and that sturdies up that fairing. So once we're all done with that, I have some more finishing work to do boxing this in, because this is a visible part from the rider with even the fork cover on there. You see that, so that'll be a painted part which has to look good and of course be strong in order to hold that fairing.